Guardians, Rite of the Nine is here, and that means contest mode dungeons, new weapon perks, shiny weapons, and another week of Spire.
I can't take it anymore.
Well, in this video, I'm going to cover 4 Titan builds that have you covered to take on any scenario that Rite of the Nine will throw at you. Let's jump right on into it. Now, before we get into it, we do have to mention Not Swap is active in Contest or Ultimatum mode, meaning that if you swap your exotic, it will drain all of your ability energy. Now, you can bypass this by swapping class exotics with different perks, or by rallying to a flag at the start of an encounter, but I made all of these builds strong enough to bypass the need for hot swap. So let's get into the first build. The first build on the list is a fantastic ad clearing build and even a good boss encounter build. This Titan build uses the classic Consecration spam to quickly wipe out a ton of enemies. We bring the Prismatic subclass, mainly so that you can take a class exotic. You mainly want to make sure you have Spirit of Inmost Light in that left column so you can rotate through all of your abilities quickly. And in that right column, you ideally want Spirit of Synthoceps, so that while surrounded, your Consecration slams will deal increased damage. Though you can take Spirit of Scars to heal, or even Spirit of Star Eater if you want to bring Thunder Crash for those DPS phases. See, with this build, you bring the aspect Consecration to launch up in the air and slam back down, sending out solar waves that will ignite enemies for a ton of AoE damage. This pairs perfectly with our second aspect, Knockout. That way, melee kills will give you back a chunk of health and start your health regeneration. So our main goal is to spam those melees to heal and wipe out a ton of enemies, which is why we take Spirit of Inmost Light to cycle back to our melee as quick as possible. And when paired with the Frenzy Blade melee, we can get 3 charges for our melee. Of course, since we're spamming those Consecration slams, we'll be bringing Facet of Ruin to increase the size of those ignitions, which is why I also like to take the Glacier Grenade, since it will benefit from Facet of Ruin, increasing both the damage and the size of the burst from those stasis crystals. And for the super, I really like to bring Twilight Arsenal for 2 main reasons. First, it can easily wipe out mini bosses, and second, we can take the fragment Facet of Purpose to gain a Void Overshield whenever we pick up an orb. While it is decent for DPS phases since it offers you a way to weaken the boss, you can alternatively run Thunder Crashes for those boss phases, which will output more overall damage. And when it comes to the artifact, this build is naturally incredibly strong, so there aren't a ton of artifact perks that can buff it. It mainly comes down to the weapons you want to bring. If you opt for fusion rifles, then bring Particle Reconstruction for an easy weaken effect. Or if you opt for rocket launchers, make sure to bring Heavy Ordnance and Perpetual Destruction for more ammo, ability recharge rate, and damage resistance. And of course, don't forget to bring Limit Break for that extra super damage. As for the weapons, I really love to bring the Lost Signal in the kinetic slot for a build like this. That way you can quickly build up your Darkness Transcendent meter, since most of your damage will be light based with Consecration. And for stats, I like to shoot for 100 in Resilience and Strength, and pour any of the leftover stats into Discipline. And what's the flow for this build? Well, you want to constantly spam those Consecration slams, seeing how they'll deal a ton of AoE damage and heal you. When you come across a mini boss, simply pop your super or melt them with your heavy weapon. And one helpful tip, if you want even more damage, you can throw your Glacier Grenade and then Consecration Slam so that you'll shatter the crystals and cause ignitions. And when it comes to those encounters, this build is both solid for ad clearing and boss encounters. You mainly want to stay away from those 2 middle encounters in Spire of the Watcher, since you don't want to fly off the edge with your Consecration slams. The next build on the list is a bit niche, but when played properly, it's really strong and really helpful for your team. With this build, I landed back on the Prismatic subclass to give you options for good DPS and ad clearing, but this time I'm taking the Exotic Gauntlet's Stronghold. With this exotic, you can perpetually block with a sword, and while blocking, you gain an additional 15% stacking damage resistance, as well as you work up stacks of Perfect Guard by blocking damage. Each instance of blocking damage will give you 2 stacks, capping out at 100 stacks. You can then deal damage with your sword to gain Restoration ×2, and at a base level, you get 4 seconds of this restoration, though this increases with how many stacks of Perfect Guard you have, capping out at 16 seconds of restoration. Now, the really cool thing about this is that you can take a sword with the perk Flash Counter. This will now make it so that roughly every 2 seconds while blocking damage, you'll emit a disorienting blast. The main advantage of this blast is that you can trigger your stronghold meaning that you'll no longer have to stop blocking to convert those stacks of perfect guard to restoration. Keep in mind that these blasts only work when hitting non-immune enemies, meaning for bosses like Persis in Spire of the Watcher, you can't trigger the restoration by hitting the boss. You need to actually hit another enemy to have that conversion happen. And what's the flow for this build? Well, the incredible thing about this build is that you have so much healing and damage resistance, you become a walking tank and can distract enemies. I love this build for encounters like Persis and the first encounter of Prophecy, since you can easily distract all the enemies while your team runs around and completes all the objectives, so that you can easily and safely trigger a DPS phase. When it comes to improving the build, for stats I like to shoot for 100 in resilience, and then I aim for as much strength and discipline as possible. When it comes to weapons, any sword with flash counter is the main thing that you want. Then you can bring a good DPS special like Lord of Wolves or Cloud Strike or even Choir of One. However, you could opt for Ergosum if you want to bring a better heavy weapon for DPS. And since you'll mainly be a walking shield for your team, you have a ton of flexibility to bring whatever artifact perks you want. Keep in mind that Limit Break is always useful to get more damage out of your super, which when paired with Thunder Crash can help you put out some good boss DPS. When it comes to encounters, this build is really strong in all of the ad clearing encounters, though there are 3 boss encounters that it works really well with. In Spire the Watcher, the final boss Persis can be really annoying chasing down you and your team, so you can grab his attention and let your team finish the wires. In Ghost of the Deep, the final boss Simuma is really annoying when trying to dunk your buff, so you can grab her attention and let your teammates freely dunk the buffs. And for Prophecy, that opening encounter can be really annoying with how many ads will spawn, and the boss is trying to constantly boop you off the map. And if you're enjoying the video, leaving a like and subscribing would be much appreciated. Alright, let's get right back to it. And the next build on the list is one of the strongest builds for boss phases. This Arc Titan build uses the aspect Storm's Keep so that we can place down a barricade that will grant stacks of bolt charge over time to you and any players behind it. Importantly, this also lets us use our weapons to discharge bolt charge, which is why it's perfect for DPS rotations. Not to mention that because we're on Arc Titan, we have access to Thunder Crash, which is one of the highest DPS supers Titans have to offer. And this is where we gotta talk about that exotic of choice. Because this is our DPS Titan build, we're bringing Curus of the Falling Star, which at a base level will increase your Thunder Crash damage by 55%, though this will make survivability a bit rough. So make sure to play your barricade as much as you can. That's because with the artifact perk Defibrillating Blast, you will heal every time you set off that bolt charge. And you have one other option for healing, especially when you need to move around. We're bringing the aspect Knockout, paired with the Thunderclap melee. That way, while charging up our melee, we have 80% damage resistance. Then when we score a melee kill, Knockout kicks in, giving us a burst of health and starting health regeneration. This also gives us an easy way to become amplified for 15% damage resistance, and it'll make enemies less accurate against you. When it comes to improving the build, for stats I shoot for 100 in resilience and strength, with any leftover stats going into discipline. For weapons, you have plenty of options. Weapons with strategists are really strong, offering you more energy for your barricades. Or you can bring a Void Primary paired with the boosted Volatile Marksman as another way to gain back class ability energy, especially in DPS phases. For the heavy slot, Anarchy lets you deal a ton of bolt charge damage while staying safe, but it really depends on the boss, since the 2 bosses in Spire of the Watcher easily get melted by Queenbreaker and 1000 Voices. For the artifact, we have 3 main perks that we want to bring. Flashover is a necessity since it'll make your bolt charge deal another 150% more damage. Defibrillating Blast is also fantastic since you'll now gain 55 health whenever bolt charge goes off. And of course, we're going to take Limit Break so that we can boost our Thunder Crash by another 30% while amplified, which can be easily accomplished by getting a melee kill. And what's the flow for the build? Well, in normal play, you want to use your Thunderclap whenever you need to heal. With its incredible power and healing capabilities, it's your best option. But because we have Storm's Keep available, when I come across a mini boss, a boss, or a champion, I love to pop a barricade and shoot my weapons from a distance. When it comes to those DPS phases, for most bosses, you want to make sure that you're amplified. That way you can pop your super and deal a ton of burst damage. Then slam down a barricade to start charging up that bolt charge and unload with your weapons. When it comes to encounters, this build is my favorite boss encounter build, offering a ton of damage with Thunder Crash and bolt charge for us and our team. What I love about this next build is that you're the ultimate support tool. We're landing back on Strand Titan for 2 main reasons. With the aspect Banner of War, we can score a melee kill or a finisher to raise our banner. Now, every few seconds, we'll send out a pulse that will heal us and nearby allies. This healing is really nice to keep you and your team alive, but it becomes even stronger with our other aspect, Into the Fray. Now we can destroy tangles to send a pulse that will provide both healing and woven mail for 45% damage reduction. The even better part is is that we naturally create even more pulses from the artifact perk to shreds, which will create the same pulses by killing severed enemies, and we'll touch more on artifact synergy in a minute. But this build isn't only about incredible survivability and team buffs. See, we also take the exotic gauntlets, Synthoceps, to buff our melee damage by 165%, our super damage by 50%, and our glaive melee damage by 100%, just by being surrounded. Banner also gives some of these buffs, but it is reduced when paired with Synthoceps. It'll still give an additional 15% melee damage and 12.5% glaive melee damage. And now we have to talk about the artifacts, since its synergy is just incredible. With Unraveling Orbs, we gain Unraveling rounds by picking up an orb or tangle. Then we take Vile Weave, so that our tangles will sever enemies, and by picking up a tangle, we will reduce its cooldown. Then we add in Horde Shuttle, so that dealing damage to unraveled enemies will create a Threadling, but mainly, when boosted, Threadlings will now sever enemies. And this pairs perfectly with Thread of Evolution, so that Threadlings deal 33% more damage, and Thread of Rebirth, so that strand weapon kills will progress a counter towards creating a Threadling. So now we create a ton of Threadlings that will sever enemies. We create a ton of tangles that will then sever enemies, and shorten the cooldown by picking it up. Plus, they'll grant unraveling rounds, all the while creating numerous hotspots, healing us and our team, and providing woven mail. When it comes to improving the build, for stats I shoot for 100 in resilience and strength, with any leftover stats going into discipline. As for weapons, I have a few setups that I really like. First, you can bring Tractor Cannon in that heavy slot, so that you can provide your team with a 30% debuff for DPS phases. In that case, I'd opt for a Strand primary with Hatchling, and a Glaive in the secondary, which will get some massive buffs and synergize with some of those later artifact perks. Second, you could opt for a Rocket in that heavy slot, so that you have some good DPS. And you can also then bring Perpetual Destruction, which will refund ammo, meaning that you can use it to quickly wipe out groups of enemies. In this case, you can opt for something like Barodiad in that primary slot, which will melt most enemies and create Threadlings. Alternatively, you could opt for a double special loadout with a 1-2 punch shotgun and a trace rifle, so that you can melt mini bosses. And you don't have to worry about ammo, since we will be bringing a special finisher to generate special ammo for us and our team. For the artifact, you can take Disruptor Spike, so that all of those enemies that you'll sever will now deal 52% less damage instead of the original 40%. If you're opting for that Glaive loadout, then make sure to take both Hold the Line and No Bell. That way, while surrounded, Glaive kills will heal you, and when you block damage with the Glaive shield, you gain another 85% Glaive melee damage for 6 seconds. And if you also bring a Glaive with the perk Close to Melee, this will put your total damage increase for Glaive melees to a whopping 441% increased damage. Otherwise, if you do bring a Rocket, make sure to bring Perpetual Destruction to help refund ammo by getting rapid kills. And you can then bring Heavy Ordnance, so that dealing rocket damage will increase your grenade and melee ability recharge rate. Plus, it'll give you another 25% stacking damage resistance. Now what's the flow for this build? Well, get a melee kill or finisher to proc your Banner of War. Then staying close to your team will mean you'll be providing them with healing and woven mail. Plus, any kills you and your team will get will keep up your banner. Pick up any tangles you create to sever enemies and provide that woven mail. If you come across a mini boss or a tougher target, you can opt to use your 1-2 punch shotgun, Tractor Cannon, or Glaive melee to quickly wipe them out. And when it comes to encounters, this build is incredible for ad clearing, and it does a decent job in those boss encounters. For Spire the Watcher, it'd be really strong in the first 2 encounters, and even the first boss, since you can bring a strong sniper as a backup DPS weapon after you tractor the boss. For Ghost of the Deep, this will be really strong in that opening encounter and the first boss. And for Prophecy, this will be really strong for the first 3 encounters. Well, there you have it, Guardians. We've covered 4 Titan builds that will help you get those ultimatum clears for Rite of the Nine. But if you want to see some Warlock builds that can do the same thing, then go check out this video here. But remember, mastering these builds is only the beginning. Experiment with different combinations and tweak your loadouts to suit your playstyle. If you found this video helpful or just enjoyed seeing new perspective, feel free to like the video and comment down below on what builds you'll be running for Rite of the Nine. Keep an eye out for future videos as we continue to explore the ever-evolving world of Destiny 2. Until then, may the threads of fate be ever in your favor. This is Lucky Mech signing off. See you on the next adventure, Guardians.